Hi, Mikhail.
Hi, Dr. Carr, and welcome everybody to another edition or another video in our series that we're doing. And this one I've been waiting for a while because Dr. Carr who needs no introduction anymore, I'm sure, is going to talk about her experience with grains and low carbohydrate eating while she was in India for an extended period of time. So I'm dying to hear about this. I'm going to just pass the floor on to Dr. Carr.
Thank you, Mikhail. So I'm here with my wonderful, smart associate, Mikhail Offer, and I so value her knowledge. And so what we're going to discuss today is my experience using 4 of the grains that we commonly use in India. I must admit beforehand, these are not things I always eat. So I just, for the sake of science, actually.
Yeah, right.
For the sake of science, I decided to do this experiment because very often Mikhail and I are asked, should I eat this? I have diabetes or I have insulin resistance. Should I eat this grain or not that grain? And we always say that the response is personalized. You've heard both of us talk about, the same food doesn't have the uh, same action metabolically in each one of you. It is different because it depends on your gut microbes. It depends on your level of inflammation. It depends on how much you slept, how much you moved. So it's so many different things. So this episode is going to kind of answer one of the questions that many of you have. What should I look for in a nutrition label? And that is what Mikhail is going to help me with. So I'm going to use a PowerPoint. Okay. So Mikhail, I'm stopping my video. Can you see my screen?
I sure can, and I'll stop mine.
Okay. So these are the 4 grains which are fairly common in India, but I don't think jawar, the white millet, or the ragi, the finger millet, are very common in North America. But these are fairly common in India. And the other thing is all 4 of them do not contain gluten. And Mikhail, you and I had to do that video about going gluten-free and staying away from gluten. We get too many questions about that, right? Sorry, I'm digressing. So these are the 4 grains we are going to compare today. And I'm sorry about the poor quality pictures. So essentially, when you go to buy any of this stuff, what are the things you should look for in the label? We talked about this before. Mikhail did a beautiful presentation on that. So now here is what the comparison chart looked like. Now you can see the 4 different grains and the energy, the carbohydrate in grams, fiber, protein, fat, and the price. And the last column is my blood glucose response. So I was wearing a continuous blood sugar monitor, and I have talked about this in another episode of one of our videos, where I wore that continuous blood sugar monitor and I ate certain food, and then of course we checked how much of the blood sugar spike happened. So, Mikhail, you had talked about what to check on the label. What I want to ask here is, you can see on the this column where it shows the price. Now you can see that the jawar, the rice flour, and the ragi are kind of comparable, except for the buckwheat, which costs a whole lot more. So my question here would be, if I go to the store and I'm looking at these labels, and you can see the all the comparisons. So one is in terms of carbohydrate. Now, in terms of carbohydrate, and this is I think this was in 100 grams of 100 grams of the product. Now, the one funny thing was, in the buckwheat bag contained 400 grams of the stuff because it was more expensive. So I had to calculate that. So all these are priced for 500 grams. So Mikhail, my question is, now if we look at all these, rice flour, obviously rice flour has more carbohydrates than maybe buckwheat or jawar or ragi. But if I was to look at only from the point of view of price, because you can see buckwheat is way more expensive than the others, So how do you think, and I'm ignoring the last column for the time being, if I didn't know my blood sugar responses, just based on this information, price, how much of carbohydrate each one of them contain, and how much of fiber and protein and fat, what do you think would be the best grain for me?
Well, at the end of the day, it is personalized. So taking that out of the equation, there really isn't that much difference between the jowar, the buckwheat, and the ragi, right?
Yeah.
The rice flour that's a little bit more significant when it comes to its carbohydrate content. Now I know you haven't listed the fiber in grams for the buckwheat, but I know
The information was not there on the pack.
but what I do know is that rice flour has the lowest amount of fiber
Yeah.
out of all of them. It'll also have the lowest amount of protein
Mhm.
out of them. So I would say that the jowar, the buckwheat, and the ragi are probably similar-ish to each other. And then we can start to look at cost, where your jowar and your ragi are definitely more cost-effective, right? You might want to go with the jowar. It's a little bit higher in protein, a little bit higher in fiber. But again, when we're talking about grains in the big picture, grains should not be forming the majority of your diet or the majority of your plate. So when it comes to small amounts, or if we are able to eat grains as a condiment rather than as the main event, so to speak, I think from my perspective, I would choose between the jowar and the ragi. Rice flour for me is always a problem. It's pure starch. It raises blood sugar very high, very fast. For the most part, people do react quite strongly to rice. It also has the least fiber and the least protein. So I would say your jowar and your ragi are probably your best bang for your buck. Jowar probably a little more because it has the fiber in it, right? And we want those fibers. So that's the long answer to your short question. I would say jowar number 1, ragi number 2, buckwheat number 3 because of the cost, and rice flour I would try and avoid.
Okay, and just clarifying, we are completely ignoring my blood sugar response at this point because not everybody is wearing a constant blood sugar monitor. However, if you don't have that information, what Michal says is absolutely right. This is the kind of a decision you can make. However, if you find that your blood sugars are not coming down, you're not losing belly fat, and you're still not feeling as good because of insulin resistance and all the things that go along with it, then the next step probably would be to get your personalized blood sugar response. So, Michal, when we add before going on to the personalized blood sugar response, I just want to mention something about, a lot of you listening to this video are vegetarians. So when you are a vegetarian, obviously your diet has a huge amount of carbohydrate in it, and most of you are eating more carbohydrate than your body can tolerate. And that is the reason Michal and I are so excited to launch our Metabolic Dietary Solutions program. More on that later, because I found out that 80 to 90% of my patients have a problem with excess body fat. And after they've dealt with their fatigue and their autoimmune challenges and everything, when I ask them, so what is it next that you want to see happen? Most of the time it is, doctor, I want to lose another maybe 10 pounds or 20 pounds or something, and I don't think I can get a handle on that. So that is where a personalized response would come, and that is where our concept of time restricted eating and intermittent fasting and functional medicine, all the 3 components of our program, are so relevant. So, Michal, in the next column, when I have my blood sugar response, obviously we can see that ragi was the one that gave me the least blood sugar spike. And truthfully, I thought it would be rice, because I'm traditionally a rice eater in India. I don't eat a lot of rice now. So based on the response, obviously, ragi would be a better choice for me. Am I right? Or do I have too little information?
the difference is significant enough. I mean, it's
Mhm.
20 points, over 20 points.
Yeah.
Significant difference to say that ragi is probably, if you are going to choose to eat a grain, ragi would probably be your best option from on a regular basis, from a health perspective. Yeah.
Again, another very important piece of information missing here is what did I eat along with the ragi, right, Mikhail? We talk about what you eat, when you eat, and in what order you eat, and in what combination you eat, right? And I think the next slide shows some of that. So, this was like jawar was something that I didn't think would spike my blood sugar so much. And just as an aside, these blood sugars are in milligrams per deciliter. So for those of you used to millimoles, just divide that by 18. But these numbers are just as a comparison, so that the actual numbers don't matter so much. So the next slide is where I don't know whether you can see that clearly. The first one where I ate jawar, that's the one with the highest spike in blood sugar. I ate chicken and coconut idli and half a tomato with that. So chicken, of course, doesn't contain carbohydrates. The coconut, no, idlis are kind of like dumplings, if I might say. So this was made of coconut flour and psyllium husk. So no carbohydrates in that. Half a tomato wouldn't contain much. And next was the buckwheat roti, again chicken, pumpkin. Pumpkin was very small piece of pumpkin, cauliflower rice, carrot, beet, whole lot of stuff I ate together. My goodness. So these were probably leftovers from the previous day. And so capsicum is a pepper and okra. So vegetables were there. Then, of course, rice, roti, chicken, dal, and broccoli. So the rice is the carb, dal wasn't a whole lot, and chicken, of course, is chicken. And the day I ate ragi, which spiked my blood sugar the least, it was ragi roti with pomfret, fish, pumpkin, dal, and beetroot. So beetroot, I think, was as a salad, if I remember right. So, Mikhail, I just want you to say something about the combination of different kinds of food and the blood sugar response in this kind of a picture.
Well, that's a toughie, because number one, the first question I would ask is, when you ate the roti,
Mm-hmm.
did you eat the roti at the beginning of the meal? Did you eat the roti, along with the chicken or the pomfret, or did you eat the roti at the end of the meal? Because that can make a significant difference as well. I'm also going to point out that the meal that you ate the most vegetables had the second highest blood sugar response, which
Yeah, and because the vegetables were all the below the ground vegetables, most of them pumpkin and carrot and beet.
that, and well, for me, there's something that stood out between the two high responses, was that on both of those, you actually ate extra nightshades, which can be inflammatory as well. But that's a whole other conversation. Combining protein and fat with your carbohydrates is really important. Starting your meal with a couple of bites of protein and fat is also unbelievably important, because that tends to stunt the blood sugar response a little bit. That being said, and trying to take everything else out of the equation, you ate protein and fat at every single meal. Now, you didn't give me amounts here, but you still did. So, your blood sugar response to the ragi as compared to the jawar, I think is significant enough to say that it wasn't your combination of foods, it wasn't when you ate the food, it was specifically the food itself. The combination, the difference between the jawar and the buckwheat is relatively insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between the jawar and the ragi, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And with Indian food, you know that when we eat something, it's usually like the roti with the chicken. It would be a piece of the roti kind of dipped in the gravy and little bit of chicken, and that's what we put in the mouth. However, going by these blood sugar responses and what Mikhail has been saying, So, do you think it'll be a great idea if I started with an avocado first, maybe a few pieces of avocado, and then I start on my roti and chicken?
I would actually have a few bites of the chicken first.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
great because we don't get a lot of avocado in India. It costs a whole lot more than it does here.
It's that protein. Everything is very nuanced, and too much protein can definitely spike the blood sugar.
Yeah.
But what protein does is, especially when it's the first thing in your mouth, is it starts to stimulate all your satiety hormones, and it gets the body ready to take in food and for an insulin response. So the body is getting ready, so that the response itself isn't such a shock. So protein generally, especially if you're not a vegetarian, comes together with fat. So starting your meal with a few bites of protein, which will come with fat, is the way to go.
So a lot of my listeners are vegetarian. So if they're not going to eat chicken, what would be a better option? And you know about Indian food, Mikhail, I know.
So if you are doing dairy, maybe even just a little bit of your dairy condiment that you can just put over some like a salad or a vegetable. Then is where some fat would be good, or some vegetables cooked in fat would be a better option, because starting with your dal really isn't going to give you the same protein response. So if you're not eating animal sourced protein, then I would say focus on a vegetable with some fat. So a non-starchy vegetable. Let me be clear: a non-starchy vegetable with some fat.
Above the ground vegetable. I love that. I love that expression. It's so easy to understand.
Ground vegetable with some fat.
Yes. So if you're eating a salad, would that be a great idea to enrich it with some extra virgin olive oil?
Yes, some extra virgin olive oil, some avocado if you've got some. Maybe even if you're using some raita or something as a condiment, even just dipping your salad in that a little bit, because there you've got a little bit of the protein fat response as well.
Okay, wonderful. And if you are not eating a salad, if you're eating cooked food, then definitely if you start off with your vegetables first, and I hear Mikhal and I had talked earlier about cooking oils. So obviously you're not cooking with the vegetable oils, you're cooking with some nice oil like coconut oil or olive oil. So vegetables cooked in a good quality oil is something that people could start off with if they are not eating a salad. And not eating salad in India is a different story because of the waterborne diseases. Many of us avoid eating salads everywhere unless you've personally cleaned it. Sorry. So would that be a great idea to start off with the vegetables first and then munch on the roti and add the vegetables to the roti?
As long as the vegetable has some fat in it. And salad has been touted as the epitome of health, eating raw vegetables. But raw vegetables aren't necessarily the best for everybody, and you don't always get the most nutrition out of the vegetable when it's raw. So don't feel like you're doing yourself a disservice by eating a cooked vegetable, as long as it has some fat with it. So above the ground, cooked veggie with some fat, fantastic way to start the meal.
Yes, and another way, if you're not intolerant to ghee, you can actually, when you're warming your vegetables, you can just enrich it with a little bit of ghee. It's got a beautiful flavor.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of different ways for even vegetarians to add these kind of different ways of eating food. As we always say, what you eat, when you eat, and in what order you eat. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.